much for coming out and being interested enough about what we're going to talk about tonight. We were originally built camping in your house. You know, I can do this anytime that you want. Am I there? No. Am I getting better? Yeah. Okay. And I can come back and do camping in your house if you really wanted another time. But so I have done this about 100 times, and I'm kind of needed something new. So we have some new information that has come out, and we thought it was important enough to put on a second presentation for you. And I'd like to go ahead and present that information tonight. And before I get too far along, Mrs. Buck is in the back.
Hi, Donna.
Okay. She has displays in the back of some of this new information. We have some of the older information that you have seen before up here if you want to refer to it. Old pictures of Port Angeles, maps about how to get off the tsunami zone if you need to. They're all here for you. So I'm going to get going if this machine will cooperate. And let's see if it will. Wow. How about some sound?
Never before in human history have so many people known so much about a risk so large that we've never experienced together. But I've experienced it right alongside my wife, which is why this idea is so personal and important to me. I'm going to tell our story at the very end. To begin, I want to tell you a new story of the Pacific Northwest. The story of the Pacific Northwest begins 3,000 miles away. To be exact, 3,000 miles beneath your feet. Because up from that spot in the core, there's a massive column of magma, which is rising to two massive plates out at the sea. And those two plates are spreading in opposite directions, but their journey is the same. Right now, the Juan de Fuca plate is sliding right underneath your feet in the exact same way that the Pacific plate is sliding beneath Japan. Now, the story doesn't end there because that plate, as it dives, the friction and the depth causes it to melt. It becomes a pool of magma, it rises to the surface and creates landscape. This process created Mount Fuji. This process created Mount Hood. This process created Mount Rainier. And unsurprisingly, this process created Mount St. Helens. This process is called subduction. And subduction is about a lot more than beautiful landscape and occasional volcanic eruptions. It's also about risk. See, right now, you're standing on North America, and North America actually goes all the way out to the ocean, where it is locked with the Juan de Fuca plate. Now, the Juan de Fuca plate is pushing and pushing so much that the edge of North America is bowing, like a ruler being pushed at both ends. And eventually, it collapses, and it starts a domino effect, where all the weak spots along that fault line begin to give way. And in the worst case scenario, we have a 9-point earthquake that shatters the infrastructure of the Pacific Northwest. And if that's not enough, and trust me, it is, bam, it also displaces trillions of gallons of water, which comes towards us and goes all the way across the ocean to Japan. And we actually have Japan to thank for the absurdly precise chronicle of our last 9-point earthquake at this precise hour. That is just one of the 43 earthquakes that we've experienced in the Pacific Northwest. And what worries me is not only that we're not ready, what worries me is that we haven't actually decided to get ready. And I think you're not ready for two reasons. I think reason number one is you think you don't know what to do. And I find that deliciously ironic because you just learned in the last 10 years that the act of subduction, which we see here, can cause destruction like this. That's new information to you. But your true culture is founded in the lasting gem of subduction, which is those mountains. These mountains are the reason you stay in Oregon. These mountains are the reason you moved here from the Midwest. And these mountains are part of our cultural warehouse in the form of camping. So let's take a baby step, y'all. Camping is when you willingly go to a remote place for an extended period of time without any services. We've always known how to go camping. We just don't feel ready for camping to come to us. Right? So listen, being earthquake ready means being ready to spontaneously camp in any of the places you find yourself: home, work, car. It also means having a hell of a lot more water than you would ever have on hand in Kansas. And it means being ready to find your family when the bridges are down and the phones are out. Let me ask you all something. I'd like a good show of hands here. How many of you feel that anyone in the Pacific Northwest should probably be ready for this earthquake? Can I see hands? I'm going to ask a second question. How many of you expect people to get ready for this earthquake? Oh, crap, that makes no sense. That you just displayed to yourself is what I call the common sense gap. When as a culture, you know what the smart thing is, but you don't expect each other to do it. That's the common sense gap. And we've been here before. We used to smoke on airplanes. Right? Okay, so how do we bridge the common sense gap? We bridge the common sense gap by building what is called a permission structure. And here's how a permission structure works, okay? We're going to a potluck, okay? And everybody brought pasta salad because that's all that we ever bring to potlucks, okay? And so it's all out there, the food's ready, we're all there to eat, and everybody's waiting politely for the first person to finally step forward and start eating. And then what does everyone do? They start to eat with that person because that person created a permission structure. And then suddenly the poor guy over here who's not eating, we're all pressuring him. Why aren't you eating? Did you not get the memo? We are now people who eat. Join us. That is how a permission structure works. So what you're gonna do after you leave today, you're going to prepare just a little. Build a little kit. Build a little bit of water. Start putting together that family plan, and then you're going to do something kind of interesting. You're actually going to share that information with your loved ones, with your circle. And you don't expect the next thing to happen, but this is what happens after you start sharing this information. All the closet preppers start to come out. No, listen. Y'all are preparing in secret because you think you're going to get made fun of, which is a weird cultural phenomena. But as you repeat that exercise of building permission structures over and over and over, what happens is you have begun to normalize preparedness. And the moment it becomes normalized, it becomes expected. And as soon as we expect this of each other, we have something new. We have a new culture. Culture is simple. Culture is basically each of us doing our very best to meet each other's expectations. That is the path to getting ready for this nearly unimaginable earthquake. And I want to end by giving you an idea of why this is so important to me. In 2004, my wife and I were living in Sri Lanka. And we were on hand for a tsunami that was created by the third largest subduction zone earthquake in history. And we worked together for 1 year on the relief effort, and then came back home to Klamath Falls, Oregon. And what really frightened me about coming back to Oregon wasn't about learning about our subduction zone, it was the worry of this question: can a culture that has never experienced an event this big change in anticipation of the event rather than after it when it's too late? And then I learned a little story that gave me a little bit of hope, because very close to the epicenter, there's a tribe in the Andaman Islands that shared something in common with us. You see, this tribe had never in living memory experienced an earthquake tsunami event. And in this event, which took 250,000 lives in 1 day, they suffered 0 casualties. The reason they suffered 0 casualties is because they established a permission structure generations ago after a forgotten tsunami. Generation by generation, conversation by conversation, at the moment that they needed it, they knew to go to high ground. Never have so many people understood so much about an earthquake as ours. But knowledge is not wisdom until it changes you. So, Portland, Oregon, world, all of us are living in different variations of a common sense gap. Never underestimate the will of common sense to reveal itself. It's just waiting for your permission. Thank you.
So, on that note, Mrs. Buck has found an amazing classroom. What do you want to call it? Lots of classroom materials. And it is got the lesson plans that are intended to be able to teach school kids about earthquakes. It's in the back. It's a really nice thing. But one of the things that I really wanted to go and share with you before we get too far into this is, remember the beginning of the show, he showed the picture of the subduction and the magma was rising, and the coast is moving and being pushed and folded. This is a very simple demonstration of what's happening. That any of you know teachers, or if you want to try to go ahead and teach somebody a classroom, this is what's moving, and this right here is what's going to cause our earthquake. So, give you a better idea, for those of you who remember the Nisqually quake, I remember it very well because I was in the Capitol building in Olympia when it happened, and the earthquake novelty wore off instantly. I had never been in one before. I didn't want to be in one after about a minute, about a second and a half. Okay, it lasted 42 seconds. This didn't. Okay, the Cascadia, we're looking at 4.5 minutes. We're going to talk more about the shock time. What has caused this? I want to give you an illustration. Out at Quileute Naval Air Station in Forks. You know where it is? It's out kind of, it's on the, off the Quileute River. It's got a 5,000-foot runway that we hope to use when we need it. Okay, there's a GIS station out there, and it takes satellite measurements several times a second. And in the last 10, 15 years, it's calculated that the Quileute station is moving northeast and rising about a ½ an inch a year. Okay, so just to give you an idea, if this is Quileute station today, and it has moved 318 half inches, so it's 160 inches. It's moved and risen that far since 1700. When the earthquake happens, this thing is going to go back to where it started from in 1700 in about 60 seconds. Okay. And during that time, and the follow-up time after that, you're not going to be able to stand. So, energy equivalent, this is about what, on a scale, what the Nisqually earthquake looked like. And to scale, that's the amount of energy we're looking at coming out of this earthquake. Now, give you an idea, Quileute is moving that way about as fast as your fingernails grow. This is to scale. It moved that far between 2005 and 2014. And this is the math and calculation I just showed you. So, when you have an earthquake, they measure what they call peak ground acceleration, and there's no point in me trying to explain it to you, other than I'm going to show you this next slide, and then we're going to come back. This is a peak ground acceleration of 0.114. Okay, that's 20 seconds of shaking for 7.1 earthquake in Mexico City 2 years ago. So, for those of you who want to go stand in the doorway, this is the best illustration of drop, cover, and hold that I've ever seen. And these people became projectiles. Now, going back to what we're talking about here, in Cascadia, we're looking at a peak ground acceleration in the eastern area around Squim of a little bit more violent than this. In the central part, Port Angeles, 2 to 3 times this. In the Forks area, 3 times plus, and in Neoband, possibly as many as 4 times. So you want to be on the ground and you want to be looking out for yourself. So what we're looking at is, of course, the biggest peak ground acceleration is going to be out here along the coast, followed by the area around basically from Pillar Point to Port Townsend, then it lessens up. It's not so much a problem of, over in this area, of the violence of the shaking, it's how long it's going to take. There are no studies about what happens to a long structure or some type of structure that is basically doing the paperclip bending thing until, so we have to keep an eye on that. Okay, what's going to happen is that shaking and that ground movement is going to cause displacement in our roads. And FEMA's high track study says that we can expect to have displacement greater than 3 inches in 80% of the highways and roads in Clallam County. Okay, they do not claim that any of the bridges are going to make it, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Up here, this is Highway 112 at a good day. I've got lots of friends that say, oh, I got a 4-wheel drive, I can get through anything. I want to see you get through that. This particular slide right here is here because this is what happens when you've got a steep slope and a road and a guardrail. Is the guardrail becomes a retaining wall, and all of this stuff accumulates on the road because it can't get over the guardrail. And that looks an awful lot like 13 miles of 101 around Lake Crescent. So another effect that you have is what we call compaction collapse. This is a compacted fill over a little valley in Alaska back in February. And basically what happened is as the ground shook, it shook enough that the sides gave way and the top collapsed. And we're concerned about that in a lot of different places around Clallam County. We have culverts and not necessarily bridges. So we have liquefaction. This is for those of you that haven't heard this before. If you get out on the beach, you're standing at sea level and you put your foot up and down like that, your foot starts to sink into the sand. That's called liquefaction. What you did is you vibrated the sand just like an earthquake would do, and it made the water release the friction between the sand grains, and it just sinks. So generally, it's a mess. This happened 4 times in less than a year in Christchurch, New Zealand, and there were a few people that just stopped shoveling their backyards. But it can cause manholes to float in the ground and pipes to float. And if you've got a car or something heavy, the heavier part can sink, light part stays on top. If you've got a big flat foundation or a slab on grade foundation, it just kind of rides on top and floats on it. So it's not necessarily the worst thing that could happen, but it's a mess. So this is the liquefaction susceptibility zone for Port Angeles. Comes up Tumwater, up Valley. Generally, there is a large area between C Street and 8th Street over to about McDonald's that, because of non-standard compaction fill during the last 150 years, 120 years or so, looks a lot like places like that. So this is welcome. You're welcome to take a look at those pictures afterwards. About 15 minutes after the earth starts to shake, Claylock will see a tsunami of about 40 feet. That'll come up to Nia Bay. It'll hit them in about 15 minutes, about the same time. And then it'll come around the corner of the strait like this, and I will, if this will work, I'll show you the okay, earthquake just happened. You can see wave is reflected off of Vancouver Island. We're at about an hour, it just goes by Port Angeles, gets down to Port Townsend. Doesn't like Discovery Bay at all. And if you watch very carefully, when it gets down to here, this little funnel in here sends water all the way into the Hylobos waterway and possibly over I-5. So, this is where, of course, our tsunami inundation thing is. It's pretty much if you're downhill from the Chinese restaurant at the corner of Lincoln and First, you're gonna get wet. So, and this is one of the things that we're constantly having to talk to people about, is we finally had to write a paper about this. Is people want to know, well, how come you won't tell me how high the tsunami's going to be? It's because we don't know. So let me give you an example. On the 3rd of July, a couple of years ago, we had a high tide out here. And if you add 30 feet to what the high tide was, it was a 38-foot tsunami. Okay, 12 hours later, we had a -1 low tide. So if you did that, it was a 29-foot tsunami. So the objective here is for you guys to get above 50 feet. Because if you go to 40 feet, I don't want the last thing that goes through your mind when you're looking up at the water is, damn, that buck didn't tell me to go. So, you want to go ahead? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a quick question. Won't there be more than one wave coming though?
Yes, there will. And the first one's not necessarily the biggest one.
Yeah.
So the thing that we need to understand when we're thinking about this is you need to get to high ground, and it's probably not going to be safe for you to be back along the water line for at least 36 hours. Okay? So don't go back down until somebody tells you it's safe, that knows what they're talking about. You know, my dog can tell you it was safe, but you can't. So, one of the posters up here is the evacuation routes out of the tsunami zone in Port Angeles. There are only 13. okay? And four of those were destroyed in the earthquake. So you can walk up this one. You might drive partway up that one and that one. You can't get up 5th Street because of the bridge there where the propane tanks are. Okay. Probably walk up Cedar Street, Valley Street, possible driving. Probably walk up 2nd and Cherry. You can't get up Oak Street or Laurel Street stairs, and you're not going to be able to get up Lincoln Street. So, if you're down here at Lincoln and First in Front, you want to be going up First in Front, uphill towards the hospital. So,
Do they think Lincoln Street will collapse?
yes, ma'am. The pictures of what it looked like in 1913
Right.
before they filled it in are right here for you to look at.
Right, yeah.
So we're going south of it,
Right.
and you're outside the zone.
If you're,
10th Street.
oh, you're way outside the zone. No, here's the corner right here. This is where the Elks Naval Lodge is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's the tsunami zone is downhill from the Elks Naval Lodge. Yes, sir.
Oh, your first bullet there, you say vertical evaluation, what does that mean? Vertical evacuation.
Vertical evacuation is you can walk uphill,
Oh, actually.
okay? Or you can walk upstairs, or, you know, if you're downstairs or downtown and you can't, it's so mucky you can't get any place, the top of the parking garage might be okay. So. Okay, so now we're going to talk about highways and bridges. And the report, did you bring the report or did I forget? Okay, never mind. I don't want to know. The report is called an RRAP. It was done by Homeland Security. And there are two concepts in this that you have to understand. Restoration versus reopening time. Restoration time is the amount of time it's going to take to fix it back to the way it was before. Reopening refers simply to the amount of time it's going to take to repair the thing enough so that we can get emergency vehicles and, you know, temporarily restricted traffic across it. And the pictures are not particularly pretty. So this is the highway. This is what they're thinking of. We've got 2,700 bridges in Western Washington. A third of them we think they can have open in 2 weeks. Second third between 2 weeks and 6 months, and 35% of them are going to be 6 months or more. So as we get in, we take a look at this. These are the reopening times for bridges. Green and red do not mean good or bad. They're a particular type. So if it's green, it's less than a month. If it's some yellow, it's 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. If it's red, it's 1 to 2 years or more. Okay? So that's just bridges.
Yeah.
These are state highway bridges only. So county bridges, city bridges, and culverts and stuff are not included in this. So, you know, for us here in Joyce, it's, we're storing stuff.
Is this presentation online somewhere where you could like enlarge it and read it?
It is not yet, but it may end up being on our JEP website. And I mean, we just finished this Sunday. So,
Good job.
We'll be there tomorrow.
right. And I'm from the government and I always tell you the truth.
Jim,
Now,
Jim, tell them, when you say JEP, explain what JEP
Okay,
is. So
JEP
people can go to that
is
website.
a private group of people in Joyce that's affiliated with the fire district. Please don't mind me. I have a medical condition and this happens all the time. It's embarrassing. And it's why I can't run for office anymore. Nobody believes a politician. That's why it's
Jeff,
Jeff got together 4 years ago with the idea that the Elwha bridges collapsed, that Joyce would be marooned for however long it took to get communications reestablished. So we started stockpiling equipment. We can now put together a shelter that can take care of up to 300 people for 30 days. We could open tonight if we had to. And because there's 3,700 people in the Joyce immediate area, we finally figured out that every one of them thought that they were going to be one of the 300 people. So we had to do a program called Camping in Your House, which is what this was originally going to be, but I think you can see why I changed the script tonight. So if you start at Highway 104 and 101 down by Discovery Bay, this is the amount of days that we expect to have to repair each of the bridges between that place and the airport.
Oh, yeah.
So, now, that's to repair and restore. Okay. It's going to look like driving logging roads around here for a while.
Jim,
Yes, ma'am.
all of your maps are coming from this special book
Right.
that is online, free for anybody to look at. And the information of how to get it on your computer, what website to go to, is on this one page. And so it's a free download of a PDF, so.
So, and the guys that wrote it got paid by the syllable, so be prepared. Now, for Fort Angeles, these are what we think is going to happen to our bridges. The brown, red areas are from DNR landslide hazard maps. The blue areas are from the tsunami maps. So you can kind of get an idea. Back here on Cottonwood Lane could be really wet. And we could have, this right here is, we think, the critical spot for where we're going to have to focus on reopening communications between Squid and Port Angeles County.
Where is that?
Pardon?
That's your parts?
Deer Park's right here.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the curve, yeah.
Curve, yeah.
That's a joke.
So with that slide on Cottonwood Lane, if it blocks the creek, this is going to flood very quickly. So, so you have the same thing, tsunami zone. We expect the Elwha River bridges not to make it, so we're thinking in terms of how we're going to get either a ferry or a temporary bridge across down at the mouth. But these are just, this is what we thought was going to happen when we started examining this about 12 years ago, and they have come up with documentation now that says, yeah, this is, at least they agree with us. So, we're back to, again, landslides, tsunami zones, liquefaction zones. This is it. This is an active fault. You know, Dr. May at the college has told me that he can see it from his front, you know, from his office. So, yes, sir.
Just a quick question. I mean, we're looking at, I guess, make some 95 to 100% of all of our products and services come out here by commercial truck. And if you're looking at 2 years to restore just at Discovery Bay, is there any thoughts of what's coming out for supplies for people in business? Or how it gets
Yes. To give you an idea of how the county wants to, can I get these new maps from you?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I would like to have the new improved maps rather than my.
I'll trade you. I'll give you those new maps if you let us put the
presentation up on the county website.
Deal. This is how it's supposed to work. Okay, so we call these micro islands. If you know where Fat Smitty's is down at Discovery Bay, okay, well, the bridge, and that's a tsunami zone. And you got the casino, that's a bridge and another tsunami zone. And this is a micro island. Those people that live here are gonna have to take care of themselves until help arrives, okay? Same thing with swim, and you get over here to Port Angeles and you've got one between Peabody Creek and Morse Creek and one between Peabody Creek and Yellow. So if you live here in this community, these are the limitations that you're going to have to think about how you're going to deal with. Okay, so that means you're going to think about sheltering in place, because we're not going anywhere, I think you can see. You're going to have to think about temporary food and water, medications. Digital economy dies as soon as the electricity goes off, so your credit cards and your cell phones are going to be kind of useless. The biggest entertainment that we're going to have after this earthquake, though, is going to be watching teenagers try to figure out what to do with their phones.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah.
If you go back to the previous slide where you showed that fault line, I'm curious what current belief is. Is that fault line going to be sympathetically triggered by Cascadia? It looks like it's not very far from the high school, for example.
Yeah, we really don't know.
We don't know whether there's going to be an actual
I think it goes right
earthquake as
through the
opposed to
track.
just the effect from Cascadia.
She says she thinks it goes right through the track. It's because that's why the outside lands are longer than the inside. No, but yeah, and this is something that's a good question, because this is something nobody really knows. Is when we talk about Cascadia going off, we have no idea if it's going to trigger the more localized faults like Seattle or Whidbey or Boundary Creek, Lake Creek, or this thing. It could. My guess is you won't know one way or the other, because you won't be able to differentiate where the shaking is coming from. But also, this influences what happens as far as your tsunami is concerned. Because out here, a tsunami only occurs if you have underwater ground movement. And I mean, it can't be like that. It has to be something like that. So when Cascadia happens, we know that subsidence I talked about earlier is going to happen. That's the big trigger. Okay, Chris Goldfinger is a doctor down at Oregon State University, and he has found studies in the coastal canyons off the coast of huge underwater landslides. And he calls, they're called turbidites. I'll say that one 3 times fast. So, but these turbidites seem to indicate that all of these landslides were triggered at the same time, because when the canyons meet at the bottom, they all meet basically, with the same stratus. So that would mean that basically everything that's going to shake loose during a 9.0 earthquake shakes loose during the earthquake. We don't think, and I've talked to people at University of Washington, we don't think that you necessarily will get a tsunami from an aftershock, because everything that was going to fall has already done its thing. So,
I have one more question for you,
Yes,
Glenn.
ma'am.
That lavender in the city, yes. What is that? Because it's hard to see the key. It doesn't match up to anything.
yeah, I know. This is the liquefaction zone.
Okay. And what street does that go up to?
Well, it starts over here about C, and it comes over here to about 8th, and then down to, you can see, by McDonald's. So,
Okay.
now, and that is not a severe liquefaction zone as these are. No.
Right.
Okay, but the reason that they are concerned about this is because there was no standardization of
Right.
how the fill was.
Or what fill they use.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah.
And you talk to Brooke and the guys that were digging the foundation for the new hospital building over there, and there was very little repeatable. It was
Yeah.
the stuff they dug up was pretty bad.
It's the same for Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, now we're going to break those micro islands have to be grouped together. So Clown Bay has the first 4, Works has this crowd, Joyce has this crowd. We're lucky because very few people live out here. Basically, we're going to be recovering travelers from about there to there. We have no idea what will happen at Lake Crescent because there's active slides along the lake right now. It goes in, it goes waves. And then you have Port Angeles and then you have Swift. So that's how we're pretty much planning on dealing with it. Pretty much this is what this is the latest, why I wanted to show you this tonight. This pretty much, the world before tonight was pretty much according to Jim. I had maps from DNR, I had maps from FEMA and different places like that. You take the information and overlay it by hand and come to a conclusion. These guys finally did all of it by computer, and they have verified that what we did manually is what we can expect. So DNR has expanded their landslide data. DOT's confirmed the estimate of the damage to highway repair times. They've clarified that the shaking levels on the peninsula are a little more difficult than they thought they were going to be. Damage will be more expensive. Repair time for highways will be months, not weeks. 30 days on your own may be inadequate, might be closer to 60. So go on half rations. FEMA is beginning to recommend pre-position of resources due to the severity of impacts. And this was an eye-opener for me. This is the first time that I've ever seen anybody say start stockpiling gravel and bridge equipment. This is just not the way business is done in the United States.
That was from FEMA?
Yeah. Or Homeland Security. Okay. Level of preparation, planning, development, self-reliance, support critical network. Government is not going to come to you like you might think. Need to increase investment in local government planning, preparation, capacity, and state resources. Just a second. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about this for a minute. About level of preparation. I want you to think about you living in your kitchen and your frying pan starts smoking and catches fire. What are you going to do? You'll put it out, right? Throw salt in it, get the fire extinguisher, whatever it takes, right? Have you called government to help? No. Okay, so you can't put it out. Then what do? You have reached a situation that is beyond your ability to address. So now what do? Call 911. And what do? They show up and they put the fire out. Do they rebuild your house? Do they clean your house? Do they do anything other than say, hey, fire's out? Okay, and do we expect them to? Okay, then how's that different than this earthquake? Yes.
Fire trucks won't be coming.
That's, the red fire truck's not coming. But on a bigger scale, the feds will come to help if you're in a situation where you can't address them. You've run out of your 30 days, but they can't get here faster than that. Okay? And we're back to the same thing we've been doing all along. It's a week to figure out how bad it is, a week to load the ship, a week for it to get here, and a week to get enough of it off to be able to have a distribution. And it's 30 days. So, give you an idea of some of the things that are going on. We have a huge effort right now to improve our airport. You'll be hearing a lot about that very quickly. And yesterday I delivered a letter to emergency management in Olympia, or at Camp Murray. Hope you all heard that. I don't want to do this all from where I set the mic down. I dropped a letter off at Camp Murray yesterday designating a number of beaches on the Pacific coast and the Strait and in Discovery Bay that we could have the Navy survey to see if they could put amphibious operations in here to supply us by maritime resources. So government is working on this, but it's absolutely essential that take as much responsibility for themselves and prepare themselves as they can, because this is going to be, like the guy said at the beginning, you know, camping is coming to you. Yes?
I have two things. One, there was supposed to be the Seattle fault, which will be affected, and I don't know. And number two, most important, if we have this massive quake, what will be the priority of influenza compared to Seattle, Tacoma, and the population? Where, with government limited resource, where are we in the pecking order?
We're fighting for our slice of pie every day. Okay, that's the best I can tell you.
And what will we do with the overflow of people do the Seattle metropolitan area?
Well, since they don't have enough gasoline to get out of town and they don't have anything to eat or drink, I ain't worried about it. They're not coming this way. Yes, sir.
We may have a bigger chip in the air. What is the airport, given the improvements, and I don't know what they are, been surveyed relating to heavy lift coming in? Because we may well have the only functional airport west of the Cascade Mountains by the time this thing is done.
You must have read my report. Yeah, and I need to talk to you before you leave, because basically I'm having a constant discussion with a bunch of guys at Fort Lewis that are civilians, and I want somebody to tell me that works with heavy lift every day. I don't want a civilian that read it out off Wikipedia.
Happy to talk to you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
This kind of goes back to some of your previous slides, but what do you anticipate will happen to the hospital?
This is a running bet with a couple of fire chiefs. When I worked for Brook & Brook as an engineer, we did part of the hospital foundation, and that is a heck of a foundation. It is big and it's got lots of steel in it. I think that the bluff will stay there. It's going to take a major cleaning effort to be able to get the hospital reopened, because there's going to be a lot of broken glass and dust and things. But I think the building will be usable after about a day and a half or 2 days, but I don't think you're going to see any radical surgery for any time. It's going to be splits and stitches for quite a long time. Yes, sir, you were.
Yes. You indicated that, I think a couple minutes ago, that the military would come in and help the Navy.
Yeah.
So, well, we have to remember that their resources will also be affected. The ships will probably be damaged, and maybe the aircraft can land, but I don't see too much available, because they're going to have their problems also.
Well, anything that they've got coming to help us is coming from San Diego. The rest of them are trying to take care of their own families. That's absolutely right. Yes, ma'am.
Do they have a date, like an idea of when this could happen?
No. Yeah, that's what I can tell you. I think somebody asked me that earlier. If I knew that, I'd be short selling. The best I can tell you is that it's happened 43 times in the last 10,000 years. The shortest has been about 250, and the longest has been about 1,000. But the average is about 270 or so. So we're overdue.